Good morning. My name is Alan Bradley, and my partners Brian Gross and Adrian Samaniego would like to thank you for your time. We're extremely excited to present to you WhoSchedules, an online scheduling solution that will drastically increase revenue for retailers. A few months ago, my son and I went to a video game store. We walked in because he wanted a new Wii game. I had money in my pocket, we were ready to buy. But when we walked in, the line was so long. Evidently, one of their employees hadn't shown up. I threw up my hands. I was so frustrated. We walked out of the door along with my $100. The manager saw us walk out the door. He knew he was losing a transaction. But in retail, managing employees is so difficult. Retail is a labor-intensive business that has flexible hourly shift work where most of the workforce is primarily young. So managing those employees is a huge problem. The three most expensive problems associated with employees is employee turnover, employee lateness, and employee absenteeism. Now we know that having angry customers walk out the door is a big deal, but how big of a problem is this? Well, let's take a look at a sample sporting goods store that has 20 locations with 50 employees per shift per location, where each employee generates $200 of revenue an hour. Now, at the most basic level, yes, when an employee does not show up, there is a direct cost associated with that. But the bigger problem here is the lost potential revenue because the employee didn't show up. So if we first look at absenteeism, with these variables, this company lost $600,000 of revenue because the employees weren't there. So why doesn't an employee show up? Well, there's two key reasons. First, the employee did not know or did not remember that he was scheduled to work. Or secondly, he did know, but because of a breakdown in communication between he and his manager, scheduled for a time and a day that he couldn't attend. Now moving on to lateness, this same company lost $540,000 because of lost revenue because the employees couldn't get there on time. Same causes as absenteeism, forgetfulness, and a communication breakdown. Now moving on to turnover. Turnover is extremely expensive. The Saratoga Institute, which is a global leader in HR research, shows that on average it costs, now this is a direct cost, of $15,000 for every new hourly employee hired. Further, one of the top 5 reasons that employees quit is because of wrong or incorrect schedules. And lastly, the number 2 reason that businesses fail in the US is because of turnover. So turnover is a big deal. This company had a cost of $600,000 because employees quit. So when you add these 3 issues together, you see that it's a $1.8 million problem through a combination of lost potential revenue and direct costs. That's a huge number. But the real issue here is that it won't stop until these employee issues are solved. So if it takes 5 years to address this problem, that $1.8 million becomes $9 million. So what is a retailer to do? Right now, nothing. But with the advancements in online programming technology, the wide-scale availability of internet and devices to use that internet, there's a huge opportunity to provide a solution that eliminates employee excuses, that empowers the workforce, and finally connects managers and employees in a way that's efficient and effective and connects them anywhere.
And WhoSchedules does just that. WhoSchedules connects managers and the workforce in a way that's really never been done before. WhoSchedules solves the issues of employee lateness, absenteeism, and turnover by empowering employees using a web-based software solution. Let me show you how it works. Say you're a manager of a retail store and you're in charge of scheduling 15 employees. This could be a daunting task in the past, but WhoSchedules makes it really easy. You log into the system, navigate to the schedule you want to create, click one button, create schedule, and WhoSchedules creates a schedule with all your employees that quick, that easy. Now you might be thinking, that sounds a little too easy to be true, but the reality is with 2 pieces of information, the shift data that the manager inputs into the system about the shift, and the employee data about the employee that the employee would enter into the system, with those 2 pieces of information in our WhoSchedules optimizer, we can make one-click scheduling possible. But, so now once we have one-click scheduling, WhoSchedules doesn't stop there. WhoSchedules now distributes your schedule by way of text message and email to any device that connects to the internet. So employees can now check their schedules on their phones, iPads, iPods, any device that they connect to their world with. So now you have employees and managers with their schedules at their fingertips anytime, anywhere, eliminating the excuse for being late or being absent because they didn't know what their schedule was. Now, Who Schedules makes tasks that are sometimes difficult to do in the past, like requesting off or trading shifts with another employee. Who Schedules makes it really easy. To illustrate, Adrian and I are going to show you a quick example of how we would request a shift off if we were in a company. So Adrian and I are employees of the company, and I'm not going to be able to work on Thursday. So all I do, go to my phone, find the day that I'm not going to be able to work, say Thursday, and I click request off.
Now, as soon as Brian does that, all the eligible employees for his shift are immediately notified that his shift's available to be picked up. So they get a message that looks something like this, and it says, on Thursday, Brian can't work. Would you like to pick it up, or you can say no thanks? Now, I like Brian, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up his shift. I click pick up, it goes directly to our manager, who then has to approve that trade. And once he does, that's all updated on Who Schedules.
Yeah, so Adrian picked up my shift, manager approves that trade, the schedule's recreated, rebroadcasted, that quick, that easy. Who Schedules really does connect managers and the workforce in a way that's really never been done before.
Well, as Brian and Alan both mentioned, Who Schedules is in a fantastic position to really provide something unique and beneficial for the retail industry. However, the question is, what can we really do for a retailer, and what can we do for a business owner? Well, let's take a look at a San Antonio-based grocer called H-E-B. Now, H-E-B has, on average, per location, 2 shifts per day, and they're 7 hours into those shifts. Now, each floor-level employee who's working during the shift makes about $7.25 an hour. However, what's interesting is that H-E-B routinely schedules 2 extra employees per shift, and they do that to combat the floor unreliability of their floor-level employees. Now, it sounds awful, but the question is, what does that mean in terms of excess labor costs? Well, on a daily basis, it's about $200 in excess labor costs. However, if we move that out annually, it's over $70,000 in excess labor costs per year at this one location. Now, that's significant because Who Schedules is priced at $2,600 per year per location. So for this individual location, H-E-B could have easily enjoyed an over 2,000% return on their initial Who Schedules purchase. And then we can do that because when we go into a situation like this, Who Schedules really increases the employee accountability in the store and significantly can either cut down or at least eliminate these sort of excess labor cost situations. However, as a Houston-based business, we're going to be operating within Houston and generally within the state of Texas. Within Texas, though, there's over 190,000 retail businesses. Now, that's a huge number, especially for us as a startup. So we decided to focus on 2 key segments of the retail industry. And these are going to be grocers and sporting goods stores, of which there's about 4,000 in the Houston market. Now, we picked these 2 segments because these are both labor-intensive businesses. They have large hourly workforces, and the individuals who make up these workforces are predominantly younger, part-time employees, and these are the ones that really struggle when it comes to scheduling accountability. So, in order to help these businesses out, our initial focus is initial beta testing of the product launch. Now, our target here was 10 initial beta testers. So we went out into the Houston market, and we saw a tremendous amount of interest already at this level. So much so that we had retailers who wanted to sign up. We didn't even have a full product yet. Now, it's a good position to be in, yes, but something interesting happened. We kept getting questions from nonprofit organizers and coordinators who kept asking, can that solution work over here? Can that product help us in our industry? Now, that combined with our invitation to this TCU event really kind of jarred our brain a little bit and kind of had to make us open our mind to think, can this work? Can we do this? Well, we can. We saw an opportunity to provide something of value to the nonprofit organizations, nonprofit industry. We saw an opportunity to really change the way that nonprofits conduct business, the way that they operate. We saw a way to help them accomplish their organizational goals.
So after seeing the chance to help nonprofit organizations, we were really excited at Who Schedules, and we decided to create what we call the Who Schedules community. Who Schedules community it connects volunteers with nonprofit organizations in a way that's easy, fast, and efficient for organization coordinators to create the schedule. Volunteers can find things to help out with in their community that are interesting to them and the things that they would like to be a part of, and they can find it quick and easy. So the volunteer would log into Who Schedules, and they would go to the website. Either way, when they click this one-click volunteering with their account they've created with Who Schedules community, they can now click one button and go and volunteer through the Who Schedules community. Now, but using the data that we're already collecting in our retail version, we saw a major opportunity to help the nonprofit organizations. So now we're able to make this one-click scheduling for volunteering possible to all of our employees using our system instantly. So now all of our employees who are using Who Schedules to create their schedules at their job, they now have a button on their phone, on their iPads, iPods, all those to find places to help out in the community. And so Who Schedules community really does, it connects volunteers with nonprofit organizations. Now, so for retailers, there's good information such as how many hours their employees are spending helping out in the community. And for nonprofit organizations, we're providing both a bigger pool of volunteers and a way to organize those volunteers in a way that's efficient, fast, and easy.
Now, you may ask yourself, what value does a scheduling system provide to a nonprofit organization? That's a great question, because when nonprofits don't have a system in place to schedule and organize their volunteers, they're confronted with so many problems. But there's two key problems. That's first, that the volunteers do not show up, or they show up late. Or secondly, because of this disorganization, the volunteers have a really bad experience at the event. So when a volunteer does not show up, that directly hinders the great work that these organizations are doing. Take, for instance, the North Texas Food Bank, which operates here locally in Dallas and Fort Worth. Last year, they had 22,000 individuals volunteer 63,000 hours of their time in order to make 43.7 million meals. That's huge. It breaks out to be a little over 690 meals per hour. So you can see that if a volunteer doesn't show up, that means people are left on the street hungry. Bottom line, when volunteers are absent, nonprofits cannot reach their maximum potential. Now, moving on to the experience. When a volunteer leaves an event that was disorganized, he has a really bad taste in his mouth. And there's a great chance that he won't volunteer with that organization again. The real danger here is shown by the National Center for Charitable Statistics, and that the number of volunteer opportunities is drastically increasing, while the number of volunteers is remaining the same. So that means that volunteers are in high demand. And further, those volunteers have a choice of where they want to spend their time and who they want to help. So if the nonprofit does not provide a structured and organized experience, they risk losing their volunteers, their workforce, which is directly going to impact the amount of value they're able to provide. At the end of the day, we know that nonprofits are businesses. Volunteers are their employees. So these organizations need to be run as well, if not better, than a traditional for-profit business. That means that they need the processes and systems in place to schedule and organize their workforce. Our team realized the huge opportunity to provide a product and make a huge profit on it. But because Who Schedules Community utilizes the same technology as Who Schedules Retail, we said, we can solve this problem. We can provide the solution, and we don't need to charge for it. So, because scheduling is this huge issue that is limiting the great work that these organizations are doing, Who Schedules is going to solve that problem. Who Schedules is going to help these organizations change the world.
Now, in order for that to happen, we have to be a profitable business. We have to be successful financially. So in year one, we place annual sales right around $260,000. We take that out to year three, and we see annual sales right under $1 million. However, we're here today because we need your help. We need help connecting with large nonprofit organizations that could really use this successfully in their operations, that could really benefit from this sort of online scheduling software. So on that note, thank you for having us. Thank you for listening. We'd love to answer any questions that you want right now.
Can you guys walk us through kind of your growth assumptions? I'm looking through your model here, and I just don't really see any rhyme or reason for the growth in year one, specifically in year two.
Certainly. With those projections, it's a great question because it doesn't seem like a static pattern, correct? Our assumption was we were going to sell Who Schedules to retailers with multiple locations. So the sales cycle, there is going to be a certain amount of time to it, but once we get it into, let's say, Academy, which is a local sporting goods store in the South, you get it in one store if they like it. Now that's going to balloon into 20, 50, maybe 100 different locations. So it was very hard to project a static 5% growth. It's not possible. So we looked at who our potential clients were and went from there as to how many locations we can capture.
You're going to charge for every location, so if you have a Safeway or some store that's got signed up and they've got multiple locations?
Jeff, that's a great question, because software as a service, there's so many different pricing models that you can use. And that's what we've decided on per location. It's at $2,600 a year.
At that price point, you're significantly higher than the competition that you identified. How do you justify that to a potential customer?
With our competition, there's nothing out there that does what we do or how we do it. As you'll notice in the plan, the strongest competitor is Scheduling, and their offering is very manager-centric. It's not bringing a community or a couple feel. And furthermore, when they developed their product, it was about 10 years ago, about a decade ago. And so we have an offering that provides more value in how it's used. And because of that value, as you saw, if we can decrease $74,000 of overcharging or overscheduling, that's huge.
And I had a question about that. It looks like the data correlates to 100% efficiency that you're going to create with the tool. What percentage of efficiency do you think you're going to create with the tool versus the way they're using either manual scheduling or existing tools?
Another great question. So each retailer is going to be different. When we spoke with HEB, even on a store location level, it's different. And so our assumption was the average is overscheduling 2 employees. For some locations, it's even more than that. It's 10 employees. So if we can create an average here and use that as our assumption, and it's lower than what the highest is, we're good.
So your 2,850% ROI was based on what assumption?
$74,000 of excess labor costs being eliminated.
So you were going to eliminate 100% of their excess
Correct.
labor costs? Okay.
Yes.
I think the thing that you underestimate a little bit in your plan is one of the big components of the problem, which is employee apathy, right? So, that's a tough one, and you'll get me as a customer if you could deliver an electric shock through the phone to my phone. Now you've got a real product. Assuming for a second that all these things are true, right? I mean, I look at this and say, okay, this is a good idea, right? It's a real problem. The technology not too difficult to implement, right? And you don't have a lot of startup costs, which is probably good. What do you think your long-term sustainable advantage is? Because you're going to start competing on price pretty quickly, I think, especially if you're dealing. Nonprofits are tough for that reason too. So, what do you think your real long-term competitive advantage is, assuming you can get it going? We
have 2. Our algorithm that actually schedules the individuals based on their preferences and the manager's preference. On the outset looks very basic, but when you actually go into the programming to do it, it's not. So we've got a competitive advantage there. We also have first mover advantage with a product like this. And then lastly, we see a tremendous amount of value provided to us in that if it's used by nonprofits nationwide, if this becomes almost a de facto standard, we take that first mover advantage and it's exponentially increased because it's being used nationwide, both by employees that are scheduling to go help Habitat, as well as the managers. Everyone's getting a trial, if you will, and sees the benefit of it.
Speaking from the Super Bowl world where we had 10,000 volunteer shifts and unfortunately we had a real issue with lateness and absenteeism. And coming from a consumer packaged goods perspective, I know that that's a relationship business in terms of the retailer. And you talk a lot about the website being your marketing tool for that. But tell me a little bit more about how you plan to gain your customer base, that retailer base, and really explain the technology and leapfrog into some of the numbers that you have here for sales.
Adrian?
Well, that's an interesting question. 10,000 volunteers is pretty wild for the Super Bowl. But what our main thing is that beta testing. And so that'll really help us establish customer testimonials and all of that. And then we've also segmented our market significantly, grocers and sporting goods stores in Houston. And so we'll be able to really jump into those 2 segments, and we have contacts in both of those industries in the Houston market. And so that's our main intent at this point: beta test the product, work with the nonprofit organizations, corporate partnerships, that sort of thing, and then really go into those 2 segments aggressively with the intent of really becoming the dominant force within them.
To expound on that, we also we will have a sales force. We know that definitely starting out when we're not a name, we will have to approach those individuals. Within the sales cycle, in those two industries, getting to the decision makers, and then subsequently the managers are who will be instructed via the tutorials online and the instructions online. That's where the key of the website was getting everyone on the same pages.
One of the things that seems like a barrier that I didn't see addressed in the plan is scheduling is just a tool that usually exists in a much bigger back office infrastructure with a retailer. And I didn't see any cost for integrating, tying into those back office systems because I just don't see a siloed scheduling system working in an outside environment unless it's integrated. Do you guys have any thoughts to integration costs into large back office enterprise software systems?
Brian, you want to tackle that?
Well, the thing is, that's right, and there's programs like Chronos and stuff like that. It's more of a timekeeping type software that helps manage your business. And so what we're doing, we've created a software that helps the other side of actually scheduling employees. Now, what we saw is a way to go from the back end. Those guys have kind of dipped into scheduling, that's not their primary business. If you go look at them, their primary business is something about managing, and then they also do scheduling. And so we're kind of taking the other approach, we're doing scheduling, but we also see it as a good opportunity of maybe an exit strategy of selling out to maybe one of these guys who want a good scheduling system as part of their suite. So in the same way, I think it's a good thing that we do have these back offices, but we want to do one thing and do it really well.
What can you say about where you're at in your development timeline? I mean, how far along are you? You talk about getting out quickly, right? So how quickly can you get to a beta product? And where are you at on that?
Yeah, well, we're basically in development. We have the whole site basically wireframe down and framed out as far as design and how that's going to operate and stuff. A lot of the actual programming, a little bit of it has been done. But to be honest, we're waiting until we get. I run a web design place, and so we're waiting till we get guys that are with me, and then we just a couple other programmers. We're waiting on a little bit more money that we're going to dump into it to really get some programmers. So as far as the timeline, that depends on how long it really takes us to get the money to get it going. But once we get the money and they're ready to go, we get our programmers on it. It doesn't take much time.
But the algorithm exists, and you've been able to test it.
So the logic side of it, which is arguably the most difficult, has been taken care of.
Right. Great.
So on your fee structure right here, it's kind of the same thing from your revenue assumptions earlier. You don't really have a good, what I would suggest to you is kind of lay out, what your fee structure is going to be, what drives that, and do the same thing with your revenues in your income statement, because I think both investors are going to want to see where that comes from, and then it can also be a nice selling tool for you. Because, say, you can break down kind of like a bottoms-up model. HEB has 325 stores in San Antonio who have 675 employees, and break that down store by store. If you have a 75% penetration rate on that market, then you have X and X revenues as a result of that. I think that'd be helpful in your presentation.
I think we're out of time. Let's thank this team again.